The answer to your last question was about who would take the ownership or leadership in moving the adaptation implementation forward. At the Aalborg meeting, were there discussions or representatives from either the political level or the financial institutions, the people who would ultimately be putting the money forward for many projects where climate change adaptation could be taken into account? And perhaps one of the answers to your questions would be, if there was clear mandates from the political or financial leaders for projects, then the tools and the other things and the scientific community and the professional community and the academic communities, they'll line up appropriately to solve those questions.
I'll take the question. It's Tim Richardson, member of the organising team. I think one of the discussions was precisely on the point that you've made, and I think there was recognition in several of the different themes that there was a need to engage, especially with the financial community. It wasn't something that was represented at all strongly in the symposium, but it was identified as something which needs to be on the agenda. I think the other issue that was talked about was exactly the relationship between the professional community and the politicians making decisions, and recognition that this is where there is perhaps a critical gap that we need to cross. So again, the politicians were not present. What were present were many professionals working in different contexts and at different levels and scales of government, discussing exactly this issue. I can remember strikingly a discussion about the preparation of Swedish national transportation plan, where the issue came up, well, what can you do in impact assessment if the government has decided 50% of expenditure will be on road projects? Where the professional community then feels that its hands are rather tied in terms of what can be done. So I think there was a strong recognition of the issue that you raise, and that this is something that we really need to have very firmly on the agenda.
Well, I know there were two of us that attended the symposium, myself and Rob Verheem. Did anyone else go? Was anyone else in Aalborg? Well, I would like Rob to just speak very briefly, maybe a couple of minutes, about your impressions. You led panel discussion, and you can probably do it right from there. Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't be surprised to know that Wes asked me this 10 minutes ago, so I'm fully prepared. Plus, Wes, knowing my reputation, I'd expected him actually to comment on the quality of the DJ set we had on Monday night when we all started dancing. By the way, I noticed that in this 2 days, music doesn't play a big role, so that's one comment from the Aalborg community. Next time, make sure you have that. Having said that, I was co-chairing the session on focusing on what EIA and SCA practitioners need. So we looked at how many case studies are available on how you actually use EIA and SCA to mainstream climate issues in planning and decision making, and there's not a lot. We know that many things are underway, but hardly any of them have been completed or analyzed sufficiently. So that's one thing that we have to start working on. The second one was that we looked at guidance. Not because guidance is the most important thing in capacity development. We can say many things about capacity development. It wasn't, to my knowledge at least, specifically discussed in Aalborg, capacity development. We focused on a subset, which is guidance. And we asked ourselves 4 questions. One of them was, what do we think the most pressing needs are right now from EIA and SCA practitioners? The second question was, looking at the guidance that's already there, what new guidance would we need? Do we need new guidance? The third one was, I have to think real hard. Skip that one, I guess, will come back to me. And the fourth one is what can IAA do as a community? Now let's take a look at the first question, like what do practitioners need? Now we'll just focus on a couple of highlights clearly. One thing is what they most urgently need right now on the ground. And we focused on practitioners in developing countries, by the way, not on the developed world. What they need is both guidance on how you effectively manage and perform an EAA or SCA process, but equally important is guidance on how you can get the data that you need, because that is really a problem right now on the ground. Data on what will happen in the region that you work, or the city that you work, or the country that you work, what will happen in the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years, so that you can prepare yourself. So that's one thing. Secondly, very clearly came out of it, there is already a lot of guidance. Please don't make new guidance. Use the existing guidance and improve the climate part of it. Let's go to the second question. Second question was, if we look at the existing guidance, is there any new guidance that we need? And actually we found, yes, there is some new guidance that we need. Because we have learned as an impact assessment community over the last 30, 40 years, we have learned very effectively how to assess, how to get information. We've learned very effectively how to organize and design participatory processes. But we haven't yet learned sufficiently about the art of science of convincing people. How do you achieve influence of all that knowledge and all that stuff that comes out of participation? How do we convince and commit politicians and planners to actually start doing things? And here we think that there is potential for some guidance that helps EASC practitioners to achieve that, because we're not doing good enough yet. The third question, which came back to me, and I was confident it would, is there any need to streamline or harmonize existing guidance? Because we all know under the Paris Declaration, harmonization is a very important issue, because the donor community is constantly confusing developing countries with all the stuff that's there, all the different philosophies and approaches and concepts. And very surprising, at least for me very surprising, is that the key conclusion from the Aalborg session, and I think Wes was instrumental in that, is don't bother about that. It will be solved by practice. I think you called it natural evolution, right? Out of all the tools, guidance, approaches that are out there, practice in the next 10 to 20 years will select the best one, and that one will survive, and the rest will slowly fade away. So that was a very optimistic view, I think. But what we found is what we really need in order to streamline, harmonize, is contact, communication. Communication between SCA experts, between EAA experts. More importantly, communication between the EAA, SCA, social impact assessment, between the impact assessment community and the sector community. It's hardly there. At least that links, I think, also to one of the last questions. We have to reach out. This is not a new thing. This was already in the mid-90s. We, as an impact assessment community, said we have to reach out. We're not doing it. We should do it. Fourth question, what should IAA do? And I think it has already been said by Luna. The key thing that IAA could do, or we, as EAA, SCA, impact assessment professionals, is to reach out. Go to their conferences. Don't invite them to our conferences. Go to their conferences. Actually, I just found out that one of the people here has the same conference back as I have, so that's creating confusion. But we both went to the World Water Forum in Istanbul. I went as an EASCA person to the water conference. Very uncomfortable. Nobody knew me, and nobody wanted to speak to me. But still, and I have been doing that over the last couple of years, and very slowly they're accepting me as a sensible person that they want to speak to. But that's definitely something we have to do. IAA can play a central role in being this hub, this focal point for communication with the other sectors. It will not be an easy thing to do, might not even be a fun thing to do, but we have to do it. Just a couple of issues, and finally, Wes, for me, I'm always looking for one-liners. And so whenever one-liners come out of a conference, I'm happy. 3 of them came out of this conference for me. I want to share them with you. The first one was actually the one that Loon already showed by Viriato. who said, yes, of course, in climate change there is a problem, but there is uncertainty. But uncertainty is no problem. Certainty is for kids. A mature society, I saw that Luna said mature scientists, of course, they too, but a mature society can deal with uncertainty. Second thing about climate change, people are always complaining about costs. It was a wonderful one-liner, I forgot the reference, look that one up, is, so you think that climate mitigation is expensive? Try unmitigated climate change. That was a very interesting one. And the last one was coming from an engineer, and that was a very hopeful one. Because he said, you know, I have been trying to integrate climate issues into engineering design. And my problem is that climate change is too slow. Now, isn't that a very hopeful message? Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. You'll be hearing more from Rob Verheem from the Netherlands Commission on Environmental Assessment in some of the other sessions. To check out the program. And now I want to turn back to Lona and Martin and just say that in being a part of that symposium, you had a special combination because Martin had previously organized a climate change conference, and so the two of them together brought both climate change and impact assessment expertise to the symposium. Although I think in both of our symposia we're sort of short on the climate change attendance. And that's partly because of the nature of who we are as professionals in organizing this event. So increasing that dialogue becomes key. I'll turn it back to Lona here. Any closing comments, Lona?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for Rob for giving an overview of the theme on development. So that was nice. Or else, no, we have no comments here.
Does anybody have?
We would like to be there.
This is not so much a question, but maybe a comment to what Rob was just saying a moment ago in terms of reaching out to other communities and potentially another community to reach out to that might not trippingly come to mind would be the community of asset managers. Those typically they come from an accounting background and whatnot, but they are often making decisions that reflect lots of stuff that's climate sensitive and often has public sector dollars going into it. And if one had a vision of the future where for these boring gray-shirted accountant types, if they were routinely, as one of their little boxes to check off, having climate change being taken into account, or had it in RFPs so that professionals were taking it into account, that would be an interesting, useful, incremental vision of the future.